Hello everybody, Andrew Field here. I just want to cut right to the chase because the tensions with Russia and Ukraine have been boiling higher and higher over the past 2 weeks, so just really want to tell you about what's been going on. So first off, Russia, Ukraine, and NATO forces have held military drills amid mounting tension about potential conflict. Also in January, European coal imports jumped 56% last month in January amid fears of disruption to gas supplies. French President Emmanuel Macron flew to Moscow about the Ukraine standoff. Russia has amassed over 130,000 troops at Ukraine's border. U.S. intelligence said Russia could soon invade Ukraine. That's what they've been saying over the past 2 weeks. Um, Biden hosted new German leader, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz, at the White House. President Biden said the Nord Stream 2 natural gas pipeline between Russia and Germany would be halted if Putin ordered an invasion of Ukraine, which is a big deal because that's a pipeline that both Germany and Russia really want, and I think Russia kind of needs because it's such a massive source of natural gas. Um, so that would be a big deal. Um, Scholz showed unity between the U.S. and Germany, which was really good. Um, a top Biden official urged Americans to leave Ukraine, and there was reports that Russia massed also its navy along Ukraine's coast. Ukrainian officials warned that they said that Russia had 48 hours to explain military activities on the border, but they didn't follow through with that. Um, on February 12th, Biden spoke on the phone with Russian President Putin. Biden warned Putin of swift and severe costs of invading Ukraine. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky said on the 16th that it was I think U.S. intelligence and Ukraine's President Zelensky were assessing that the 16th, this past Wednesday, would be the day of Russian invasion. Thankfully, it was not. But I do believe that Russia is intending to invade Ukraine, and I'll get as to why later on. So, when Zelensky thought that the 16th was the day of Russian invasion, he claimed it as a day of Ukrainian national unity. This was a massive reason as to why I believe that Russia is still planning to invade Ukraine very shortly. So there were reports that came out that Russia supported because they showed a video, but there were reports saying that Russia seemed to pull back some of the troops along Ukraine's border, and I was happy by the news because I thought that the tensions were going to die down and eventually not be tensions at all. But in fact, Russia was doing the opposite. They put out a video of troops leaving the border and made people believe that they were removing troops, but actually the U.S. and NATO both came out and denied that Russia was withdrawing any sort of troops from the border, and in fact they were saying they were still building up troops and amassing more troops along the border with Ukraine, which was very alarming news that came out. Ukrainians raised national flags and played the country's anthem to show unity. On the 17th, so this was Thursday, Ukraine got hit with a cyber attack. Ukraine accused Russian-backed separatists of a big provocation, and the West said Russia or Moscow was trying to create a pretext for invading Ukraine, and that's something that Biden said as well. Biden said the threat of Russian invasion of Ukraine was still high on Thursday. Russia filed a report with the United Nations alleging Ukraine's military committed crimes against the residents of eastern Donbas region, which is total bullshit. The Russian separatists shelled a city in Ukraine. Moscow expelled a U.S. diplomat, which raised tensions even more. And this was big news too because the U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken changed course when he was asked by the U.S. ambassador to speak at the United Nations, feeling that this was enough of an issue for the Secretary of State to speak on the issue. So he came to the United Nations, and Blinken said, quote, Russia plans to manufacture a pretext for its attack, unquote, and saying that state-run Russia media is spreading false narratives to their people because Russia is by no means a democracy. I hope all of you are aware of that Russia is by no means anywhere close to a democracy. Russia controls the media. Russia gives their people no sort of rights. Russia is more toward communism than a democracy right now. So I just wanted to point that out. So yeah, they're using the media to hype up and energize their people to going into war. Russian-backed separatists. So back in 2014, apparently Russian-backed separatists took over some land in eastern Ukraine, and so these separatists announced an evacuation of the region's residents to Russia. So I can't imagine Ukraine having to deal with this crisis many years back, actually in 2014, where they took a part of land from Ukraine, and now these residents are fleeing to Russia to help, Russia, and these residents are going to Russia, while meanwhile, they're the other residents, like the people who are able to fight, are actually staying and challenging the Ukrainian government. So the U.S. Came out and said that Russia was responsible. When I said the cyber attack, they said the cyber attack was on Ukraine's banks and government websites. And this was the biggest news of them all, actually. Very credible from President Biden, who not only spoke with President Putin, but spoke with Zelensky many times, Ukraine's president, along with other world leaders, and of course is getting top U.S. intelligence at all times. He stated yesterday, I believe, that he believes that Putin has already decided to invade Ukraine, though he was saying diplomacy is still an option. So that's really big news because obviously that's going to escalate tensions even further. That's saying that they're just trying to create diversions, Russia, to try and give them a reason to invade Ukraine. So there's been shelling in Ukraine that's intensified, and 2 Ukrainian soldiers were killed. As of today, I saw that pro-Russian separatist leaders in eastern Ukraine have ordered a full military mobilization, where they're mobilizing all their forces in that region that Russian separatists have controlled, and are going to fight Ukraine's government. So this is going to be a really tough situation, because with Ukraine's government, if they attack these separatists, Russia may use that as a reason to invade. Obviously, Russia's in the wrong, but I believe that what's going to happen is these separatists are going to attack the Ukraine's government. Ukraine's government, although it has been hesitant to retaliating, is going to have to protect its citizens and attack the separatists. And then Russia is going to say that ethnic Russians and the Russian people are under attack, and I believe that the Russian government will then invade Ukraine. That is my prediction. And I also saw today that Russia, Putin ordered large-scale military drills involving Russian nuclear forces, where ballistic missiles and cruise missiles were launched from land, air, and sea. So that's obviously a very bad sign. Leaders conferred in Munich. Vice President Harris was there and warned of far-reaching sanctions against Russia and its allies in the event of an invasion. Ukrainian President Zelensky accused world leaders of appeasing Russia and urged them to take stronger action to support his country. I 100% agree with Zelensky here. I think that even though countries like the UK and Germany and the US and other countries have said that what Russia is doing is wrong, but the idea of sanctions is not enough. I don't think Ukraine is a part of NATO, but they should consider them a part of NATO at this point. I believe that if Russia does try and invade Ukraine, NATO should defend Ukraine by all means. And my personal belief is that the U.S. should definitely go to war with Russia if Ukraine is invaded by Russia. I think Russia has been a thorn in the side of the U.S. for as long as Russia's been around since the time of the Soviet Union being started. Even after the Soviet Union collapsed, Russia has been a huge threat to the U.S. and they've never tried democracy. And Putin has full dictatorship of Russia. Um, he has all of the military at his disposal. He doesn't need to ask anyone before launching anything. So I think that if there is any sort of invasion that starts to happen in Russia, the U.S. and its allies should come to Ukraine's aid and defeat Russia. After the U.S. and its allies, I know war isn't the best option, but at this point, with Russia having its troops at the border and these military exercises and trying to have a reason to invade Ukraine, I think it's in the best interest of not only the United States but of Western Europe to fight alongside the United States, and the United States better fight against Russia. And after the U.S. and its allies defeat Russia, then we could make Russia an actual democracy. And obviously, would have to kill Putin for sure. So that's my opinion. So we'll have to see what will happen in the next couple of days because things have intensified a lot in the past couple of days. So I will be analyzing everything that I'm seeing and will hopefully get back to you soon on that. In other news, there was Canadian protesters that protested COVID-19 restrictions along the Canadian-U.S. border. Um, it was a bunch of trucker protesters, and eventually the police moved in, Canadian police, I believe, and arrested some of the protesters. It's been big news for a while because I believe the protesters were actually blocking an opening between Canada and the U.S. So I kind of understand why they would arrest these people. And obviously, I don't agree with them protesting COVID-19 restrictions, but they should still have the right to protest. So, yeah, I don't know how to feel exactly on that. If they're blocking trade route between the U.S. and Canada, then they need to be moved, I guess. So, I don't like the fact of limiting freedom in any way, but I guess if it's blocking a trade route, then they have to be moved. So that was what happened with that. The U.S. added 467,000 jobs in January, despite the Omicron variant surge in early January. COVID-19 cases across the U.S. have dropped. Deaths are still not dropping a lot so far, but in terms of cases, they have been dropping all over the U.S. I think Omicron is losing steam, and states and cities, for that reason, are removing their vaccine and mask mandates. So, the news came out recently with a huge concert of Coachella, which I think has like hundreds of thousands of people usually go. They've decided that they were not going to have any sort of mask or vaccine mandates, which I think is a very, very poor choice because when you're talking about states and cities dropping their mask and vaccine statuses, mandates, when they're dropping their mandates, that's because they're seeing cases drop, right? And they just feel like that's the right thing to do. The officials have agreed on that. But with Coachella, it's a very different thing because it's a huge social event. It's where a bunch of people are going to be packed together. So with these scenarios, it's very different from cities and states dropping their vaccine and mask mandates. Since you're packing so many people close together, it's going to be a COVID hotspot. And some people are worried that we're going to lose the progress we've made in terms of dealing with COVID because of this decision. So I think it's a very poor choice on Coachella's part. The economy has added 7 million jobs over the past 12 months. Obviously, COVID has been a huge part of that. and the fact that COVID has put a lot of people in unemployment or underemployment. So, you have to consider that as well. But it's a very good sign that we are recovering pretty well. And I think a lot of people are starting to get back to their jobs or have decent jobs. So that was a good sign. There have been over 100 deaths in Brazil from floods and mudslides. So hopefully the situation improves there, and these natural disasters won't take many more lives in Brazil. Governor Christie said of January 6th, the insurrection that happened, that it was a riot incited by Donald Trump in an effort to intimidate Pence and Congress to want the election overturned. That was very big. Governor Christie was a huge supporter and close friend of President Trump, so I was surprised that he made those comments, and I think it was a good thing. Mike Pence, former vice president, recently spoke saying Trump was wrong to say he had the power to overturn the election. And from Pence's perspective, I don't give him that much respect. I respect that he actually said that, but it's been over a year since the insurrection. The only reason he brought this up was because Trump has been continuing the lie that recently that Pence could have overturned the election. So it's good that he put that out there, but it took you over a year when you were the vice president of the United States, former vice president. It took you over a year to say that it was wrong, that you couldn't overturn the election. He did kind of say that he didn't have the power to do that back then, but I don't know. His lack of being able to stand up to Trump is pretty pathetic. But I guess it's good he said that. Biden rejected Trump's attempt to shield White House visitor logs, including the day of January 6th. And there were a lot of news coming out based on the fact that Trump was getting classified documents sent to Mar-a-Lago. I believe that being president of the United States, you are allowed security clearance even after you are president. But I feel like there should be special circumstances when you are being investigated and have a current investigation on you. So I really hope that they look into that more. The January 6th committee probably is going to, because the January 6th committee is still moving forward and trying to get as much information as possible. So if the documents he was seizing are related to January 6th, they definitely can look into that. So hopefully they're able to figure out what documents he's been seizing and probably trying to destroy. And speaking of the investigation, he's still under investigation from the New York Attorney General's office in relation to tax fraud. So a judge just ordered that Donald Trump, his son Donald Trump Jr., and Ivanka Trump, all three of those horrible people, will have to comply with the New York Attorney General's subpoena for testimony, which is an amazing thing because if you remember with the impeachment, both impeachments he has not had to testify, which is a big thing because with his loud mouth, he's probably going to say something and screw something up, so they were making sure that he was not going to have to testify during the impeachments. But for this judge to say that he has to testify along with his two eldest children that have to testify with this investigation is really, really great. With this case, Kim Potter, ex-Minnesota officer, was convicted of shooting Daunte Wright, sentenced to 2 years in prison. I forgot about this case. Daunte Wright, I covered it in a video last year because Daunte Wright was killed in April of last year. It was a really crazy case where apparently Daunte Wright was stopped. I think they were saying something like for having air freshener in his car, for some racist reason, right? Where you normally wouldn't need to be pulled over. And then they eventually found out when they were probably like scanning his plates or whatever that he had what was it? He had a warrant that was not fulfilled. So they didn't know that before they pulled him over, but afterwards they found that out. And this lady, Kim Potter, claimed that she pulled out her gun instead of her stun gun by accident. She was meaning to pull out her stun gun, and she pulled out a gun and shot him in the chest, and that ultimately killed him. Um, she did this because, as they were trying to arrest him, he was resisting arrest and was trying to flee the scene. So, obviously, it makes sense that she'd try to pull out her stun gun to stun him and then he would be arrested. But to believe that you would mistake pulling out a stun gun with an actual gun is pretty hard to believe. Even if it's like, obviously, if like the scenario is going, where you're like in the moment, but you're a police officer that has probably been trained and serving for a while. I don't know exactly how long she's been serving at the point when she killed Dante Wright, but I find it hard to believe that she would accidentally pull out a gun instead of her um, stun gun. So, yeah, she shot him in the chest and he died because he had an outstanding warrant. Prosecutors were hoping to get an 86-month sentence, which is over 7 years. So it was a long sentence they were hoping for. They only got 2 years, and I think 2/3 of it she has to spend in prison, and then the last third she might be able to get parole. So it's really not that long of a sentence, and I honestly believe it's a bit light. Obviously, it does not compare to the situation with Derek Chauvin and George Floyd, where he literally was standing on his neck for, I forget how many minutes, but for a very long time until he literally killed him. So I believe that these scenarios are very different. Um, you can argue with this one that maybe it wasn't intentional. Um, with Derek Chauvin, there's no argument that he was not intentionally trying to kill George Floyd. So Derek Chauvin got 22 and a half years. This lady, Kim Potter, got 2 years. So it shows the difference, obviously, but I think that she should have gotten 4 or 5 years. Like I said, find it hard to believe that she'd mistake a gun for something else. And she shot him one time, which is another important thing, that she didn't shoot him multiple times. But yeah, I think she should have gotten a bit longer sentence, and people were frustrated with the result. So, with the Republican National Committee, recently they voted to censure Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger, and this happened because both members of Congress investigated the Capitol riots and for speaking against Donald Trump, which just shows how bad of a state the Republican Party is, and that's very disgusting. That just because they were trying to follow through on an investigation and were critical of the former president is no reason to censor them, obviously. Um, so, something very surprising that happened was several lawmakers denounced the move. Several Republican lawmakers. These two aren't too surprising. Senator Mitt Romney and Senator Bill Cassidy. I think it's very great that they did that. But the one that was really surprising was Senator Mitch McConnell, which turned down the RNC decision and called the January 6th an insurrection, which was very, very crucial to use the word insurrection along with denying the RNC decision. So I think he's clearly split himself from Trump and those supporters. And I don't like Mitch McConnell. I think he's made a lot of poor choices in his long political career. But I do respect the fact that he went out there and said that. Um, and the last thing I have is the 2022 Winter Olympics have started in Beijing. I personally have not watched it because I will not support the Olympics being in Beijing, with China being another country that's, communist and doesn't respect people, and along with their treatment of the Uyghurs. So I'm not going to watch the Olympics for that, but yeah, they're almost over. So that's all the news I have for you guys today. I hope you have enjoyed, and I hope you have a good rest of your day. Bye.